Okay, so thank you very much. Next from Lehman College, we have Allison Vogel and Timothy Alborn with their presentation, Beyond Genius, Teaching with Interactive Playlists in a History of Pop Music course. So, music is always fun.
So while Tim is talking, I'm going to kind of go back and forth a little bit to show you the actual site, because these are screenshots. I think he's done a really great job on his own, so without further ado.
Hi, my name is Tim Alborn. I teach history at Lehman College, and today I'm going to talk to you about a course I'm teaching for the first time online called Popular Music in Britain and North America. This is the homepage for the course, and I'm going to walk you through how I developed it, the different decisions I made about which software to use, and then I'm going to show you what the different assignments are. So without further ado, I originally decided I wanted to teach a fully online course that focused on the history of popular music in Britain and North America as a comparative history course, and one that would get students engaged in the historical context that was going on at the time that was both creating and being created by the music that I'm talking about. And I had two basic ideas for the course. One was to generate playlists that students would be able to interact with each other and with the songs on the playlist, and do that in two different ways. One, doing it as a sort of chronology for the first half of the course, where they follow through the textbook and listen to songs that go along with what they're reading in a history of music textbook. And the other, in terms of research projects, that I thought would really be well adapted to an online course, where the students generate their own playlists on specific historical topics. And I would provide them with a large number of possible songs to choose from, and they would pull from those and build their own playlists. And the idea there is this would give them a way to kind of provide some scaffolding that they could use in the end to write a final research paper. So with that in mind, I visited Allison Vogel, who is here to answer questions since I'm not able to be here today, and asked for some ideas about what might be the best way to go about this. And she provided a couple of suggestions. One, which I'll talk about in a second, is a website called Genius, which some of you might have heard of, is an open access playlist-oriented learning tool that started as a music lyrics website and has kind of expanded to include higher education. And the other site she mentioned, which I ended up using, is called Wikispaces, which is essentially a wiki site that is very well.
Steve. We just lost Steve. See if you could go find him. Oh, what did I say about technology? I jinxed myself, didn't I?
Did you hit F5, refresh the screen, then try it?
Yeah. You know what it looks like it was doing? That's okay. I will, what it looks like it was doing was, let's see. Wow, they just like lost the internet totally. Let's see if I can do it here. Yeah, okay, so we talked a little bit about Genius, and that's part of the project that we use. Has anybody ever seen Genius? So it's now, should have done it like that, Rap Genius, okay. So it's a place where you can go and annotate some work, and it's actually gotten a great deal of attention now, because it started with Rap Genius, and then it went in and started to do other forms of documentation. So if you've ever been a music fan or a concert fan, you'd go to a fan site and you'd talk about something that you actually saw. And so, hi. And so when you're talking about so when you're talking about something, you're actually annotating the music, right? So you'd listen to the lyrics and you'd be saying, this is what I think it means. So they started to do this, and then the two gentlemen who ran the site decided that they wanted to use this for an educational purpose. And I was actually one of the people on the earlier side of this when they were just starting out. And they asked us questions about, as educators, what do you think that you would be interested in doing? So the way it works is that there's let's do some pop. And you'll see that when there's a particular song, you would highlight it, and obviously here you see that someone has actually created an annotation. So that's where we start talking about how you can take something apart, right? You love to do this with documents, you love to do it with content that is, so they actually went to Poetry Genius and they sort of created this whole system. What's really nice about the Genius family though is once they did all of these types of annotations, they said we're going to close it to educators so that there is a private sense, right? Because everything here is public. And so they are working towards that, you know, kind of, what I find as a technologist is that we still haven't found a product that does everything for everyone. And except until we came to Wikispaces. And unfortunately, we're not going to get to, let's see if I can see if I can get Tim to, no, okay, so.
Did you want the?
I mean, if you have it, yeah, it's gonna take me a few minutes, I don't wanna waste any time when we
Gotcha.
do it. So I'm just gonna take you to the project area and show you how we set this up. So one of the exciting things is when I work with a faculty member and I wanna hear what he wants to do and I think about it and we're looking at these tools, right, back to back. But when we saw the flexibility of what Wikispaces could provide, which was, yes, we could annotate, yes, we could have conversations, there could be private, there could be public, and this is basically just a web page. So think about a wiki as just a basic web page. And so I'm gonna open this up. And so Tim did this as if, almost as if this was Blackboard, right? So you'd run your syllabus here, and as you can see, I think you can tell that he's put an incredible amount of work into this. So there's nobody that's gonna say that he hasn't put literally dozens of hours. But the fun part was that when I taught him how to use the tool, basically I added the members for him, I added all the students. We have this site located inside Lehman. Lehman has a one login access. So it's secure, we have the HTTPS, so it's secure and the students are working together. And so he had his own public space for the students where everybody got to, and he created all of these pages. I would say there was over 100 pages in here. So you can tell this is someone who's really into music history and wants to really exchange with the students, but he wanted to do it in a closer atmosphere so that you didn't have to go to Wikipedia and start coming out with lyrics, and he was really controlling the types of lyrics, the types of categories. So what's really exciting about the way that he did it was he had the artist linked, so they got to learn a little bit more about the artist, and then he talked about cover art, he talked about lyrics. And one of the things that's really exciting about Wiki, now watch, I can do this just like what we did with the Poetry Genius. I click edit, and if I'm a student, I would take this, and it says, Mister, you may have traveled near or far. And if I had a comment to make, I would be able to do the same thing, annotate that piece of comment. So the Wiki is not just, and that's why I said it's not a limited tool. He was able to create his own atmosphere, his own kind of ecosphere, if you want to, you know, of music. And then talked about it in terms of the era, right? So it was really done in such a way that he did it from dates, right? So it was date order. Then you have pages and files that he was able to add all of these pages for all of the work, all of the music. So Wikispaces has also loaded all the MP4s that he's done. And again, everything is just click the plus button. So as far as a teaching tool, this was, he would just go out, I would teach him one or two things, he'd come back a few days later, have a couple of questions. He'd ask me those questions, he'd go back off again. 15 pages later, he was off and running, right? So it's about creating an atmosphere where a professor can just, you push the button and he's just like 0 to 60. And that for me was the most exciting part of it, was that we exchanged a great deal of information back and forth about what the site would look like. So now I'm going to take you to the projects page. Once he set up all of the content, so this is like you almost want to say it's like a MOOC or a textbook, right? Tim is was the former Dean of Arts and Humanities, and of course you can see he's a music history buff. But this basically is his textbook to his students. So if we really wanted to take this to the next level, we could take the content and of course whatever is you can sell this, but you could use this, with your students in an iBook, for instance. And so here he's got the assignments, and he gave all the students the same assignments at the beginning. And he could probably explain the projects much better, but he also had them do connecting questions, and it's and here's where he took the songs, and then he wanted them to discuss the list of songs at the bottom of the page with the history in mind, with the textbook of that chapter. So it was a really kind of back and forth. It wasn't his textbook, by the way. And so you would see he spent some time playing. He thought about this and said in a hybrid situation, he would love to play this 2 minutes of Led Zeppelin doing Heartbreaker in a live class with the students actively, listening together. Because so we're going to sort of take this from a fully online to a hybrid at some point. And then he creates the video link for it.
This is something we never do.
Now imagine our students who really, are sort of limited to certain types of music genres, all of a sudden experiencing the genre through the eyes of the created history. And so, again, he could probably answer it. And so what I'm going to do is take a couple of minutes to pull it to at the end and pull Tim back into this. But I want to show you the projects page and how it was set up. Again, this looks really complicated, doesn't it? But once we had the students registered, all we had to do was create a project. He built a playlist. And these are now the students' assignments. So you get to see that they created, they had to do quite a bit of reading in order to get there.
So the students are making the suggested readings, is that?
Yeah, they're building a playlist, right? So,
But I mean, they're also suggesting readings that would explain that.
yes, exactly. So, now and this particular group, I think, chose drug use. So, again, these are the readings for it, the songs that went with it, and then he asked framing questions. So the student writes, the songs that I have chosen made me realize that many of them are actually songs about changing society's views instead of drugs themselves. And many of them in the drugs group, they did figure that out. They realized that it was a societal change over the fact that it was the drugs, which is like, something huge in terms of their own understanding of history and how it's portrayed and what we believe and what actually. So it says, after reading the recommended readings, it made me realize the war on drugs is and was nothing but a complete failure, which Tim actually argued with him at some point to say, and when you use something that's so definitive like that, it probably did more to promote drugs than to stop it. Marley, on the other hand, didn't want his songs to be about drugs. He wanted his songs to bring about talking points, different situations that were going on in Jamaica. And the reggae that he created transitioned well into the hip-hop rap scene. Now these are our Lehman students, and there's a high degree of sophistication in the ability that they had to take and cogently discuss the concepts. So this is his teacher, and with more specific references to the readings and borrowing from your comments in the songs, this should transition to a great paper if you decide to do that. So you could see that these are students' responses to the playlist that he created, and then they, at the end, will create their own. And then they have, he divided it up into weeks and with teams. So all we did was simply just move the students into the teams after we created them. And then here are their assignments. So they worked in teams. They had to answer 5 questions for each of 2 songs, and at least 2 or 3 connecting questions. So again, this is really leading them in a sophisticated way through the process, but very scaffolded. So when they had to click, it says click to access the discussion board, and then here's their discussion board. And then here, again, were the comments. Seemed to be consensus on this team. And you notice they're starting to use this. And this is really early on in the semester. So as it got a little bit more formalized, there's more conversation happening. So have any of you been familiar with VoiceThread? So VoiceThread is another kind of tool that we use for student conversations to happen like this, that's not just a static discussion board. And again, having the ability to do this is a phenomenal thing when you're thinking about group activities. So this really was team efforts where they're having discussions and they're able to take this. Now Blackboard does it with a lesser degree of sophistication that people don't frequently use. So if somebody came to me and was more comfortable with Blackboard, we could still give them the actual exercise without having to go and create their own wiki. Now you have to remember something too when you're working with, and we're going to do this in the next, the whole premise is 2 heads are better than 1, so we're going to sort of meld into that in a few minutes when we, how much time, so I know if I can put him back on.
You have 11:30.
Oh, okay, good. So it's just interesting to see how it's the 2 heads aspect of saying what it is that you want to do, what you want the students to be able to do, you know, after this class is over. And if you want them to be able to think about history in terms of, you know, political and social and, you know, anarchistic and all those kinds of really exciting things in history, I think that creating music as the hook was sort of a genius idea in itself. And then again, having this group effort, having individual responsibility, I mean, you can just see where all of the, and again, having to go through all the songs, see where the connections were.
So, after the midterm, we move on to the interactive playlists. For each of the 2 units, I have 6 different topics they can choose from. One group is on culture and society, drug use, gender roles. Getting around is essentially songs about cars, race relations, religion, and social class. The large majority of the students pick either drug use or gender roles, perhaps not surprisingly. The ones who chose gender roles actually have been finishing their assignment. The ones who chose drugs have not been, quite so.
And he may actually quote the same
second
students,
unit,
so
which
I'll skip past.
we're in the middle of right now, as you're hearing me talk, are more on economic issues and political issues, foreign wars, gun and street violence, law enforcement, money, politics in the state, war. Many of these are actually really timely, and law enforcement in particular, students have been very interested in. And a lot of students are looking at money and work as well. How does this break down? Well, what I essentially do is I tell the students what to do, basically picking 10 songs about one of the topics. Each of the songs links to a wiki page, which is very much like what they learned to do in the first half of the course. And once they pick their songs, they essentially give me the songs. I build playlists for them on individualized team pages. Just to take drug use as an example, I give a general overview of what I cover in this unit. I provide suggested readings, all of which are available as PDF files online on the wiki site directly. So there's no going back into Blackboard or anything. They just click the link and they're into the PDF. And then finally the list of songs. In this case, it goes from Bo Diddley, song Pills from 1961, through Buffy St. Marie, The Birds, Purple Haze, all the way down to 50 Cent High All the Time. And there's about 40 songs in between. Once they pick their songs, this is a sample playlist that one student came up with. They have to pick songs that are at least in 3 different genres from both sides of the Atlantic Ocean and from 3 different decades, which forces them to not just focus entirely on hip hop or on American music. And I think students, I think, really got a lot out of that. A lot of them kind of got pulled a little bit out of their comfort zone and learned a little more in the process. They clicked on My Brother's a Basshead. This is what they come up with. I have a slightly different set of questions about each of these songs. Instead, unlike the first 5 weeks where they only answered for 2 songs, here they answered a question for all 10 songs. They have about 3 weeks to do this, and they've been basically able to keep up with this work. The first question I think has been the most revealing. Why did you decide to include this song on your playlist? And it ranges from this was always a favorite band of mine to this was a song that was my my religion growing up to I never heard of this artist, but I was kind of curious from the title. I asked them then to link the song to the artist. There's a link on every artist to a short biography. Some of them are PDF files of biographies I found on Google Books. Many of them are biographies that are provided by the website allmusic.com, which is a very reliable, much more
all
reliable
information
than
that's
Wikipedia.
freely available?
The articles are all authored by respected music critics, and the information is pretty. It's information I'm quite happy to have the students include on a term paper. And by and large, the students have been very, very good at kind of sticking to what I'm sending them to, as opposed to going to Wikipedia, which for a history of pop music course is a very kind of dangerous thing to do, but also a very, very easy thing to do. And I've been very happy so far that students have been kind of, without me saying don't go to Wikipedia, I think giving them the resources they need right here close at hand has allowed them to kind of stick within what I trust in terms of sources. I also have a link, if you notice, to a label, to a website called Discogs, which essentially gives a full list of everything else that the record label produced when it was going. If they click Tommy Boy, they basically get a short description of the label and full discography to help put the artist in context. Who else is recording for Tommy Boy at the same time? And finally, and this is the case for all the song pages in the first half of the course as well, there's a link to a video, almost always YouTube, sometimes 1 or 2 other different video sites, which is essentially a way to, a very cheap way, and a way that would not have been possible even 10 years ago for almost every single song to be accessible very easily and for free, without using up a huge amount of memory space on the website. The only downside, of course, to that is I have to continue to make sure the links are working. This was especially a problem during spring break when I was in Berlin, and all the YouTube links in Berlin don't work in America and vice versa. So there are some problems there, but generally speaking, that's worked very well. I think students have been all able, for instance, in the first half of the course, all able to look at the same version of the same song, which can be a problem if I'm sending them off by themselves to do this. And then so once they've done that, they go back, and very similarly to the first half of the course where I ask connecting questions, here I ask framing questions that are individually geared towards each individual playlist. In setting this up, essentially I would come up with a basic set of framing questions for each topic, and then add in variations based on, kind of customize it to the playlist that the student selected. So in this case, for drug use, I say, here's the different drugs you selected, building on the song pages, and also building on the readings. Connect these to the type of music they accompany, talk about how different genres talk about the same drug, talk about what happens in terms of the context of drugs in society. This student in particular chose a song that I'm going to spend a little more time on because it's a very interesting example of, I think, why this course works very well online, is a song called Cracks No Worse Than the Fascist Threat. This was a song produced in 1987 by an American singer-songwriter, Carmick DeForest. I included it in my suggested songs because I didn't find any other song that was as good a song about the war on drugs. So I asked the student in this case, why did you pick this song? He says, it's a political song, it brings awareness to an issue, sounds very rock. And finally, the title is something you would just want to listen to, which is kind of the ideal, because this is a person you've never heard of before, but it's a way to get interested in a topic that he turns out he didn't know anything about by starting with the song. I like to think of the songs in this class as a gateway drug to history. So I next ask, talk about the context of the song. And he comes up with an answer that makes it very clear he doesn't know what the war on drugs was in the 1980s. He says, for some reason, he's talking about fascism here and also talking about crack, and I don't quite understand. So that's where I jump in with a comment. I think you've missed the main point of the song, perhaps because you were not aware of what was going on when you were 4 years old. It's a song about the war on drugs. I have a brief description of what that was. And what makes this a great course to teach online, I could immediately find a source through JSTOR about the war on drugs, published in 1988, right after this song was produced. Post a link, so this is the original recommended readings. I just stick Bruce Bagley's U.S. Foreign Policy on the War on Drugs right in there. I say, go look at this, and then tell me what you think. The student went and looked at it. He said, oh my gosh, as it were.
There's
It
the
made me realize
realization.
the war on drugs is and was nothing but a complete failure.
And
Well,
you-
that might be a
that's
little
the one
extreme
that you read.
interpretation, but he got the point. And he got the bigger point, which is that he realized that many of these songs are not just about drugs, they're about changing social views about drugs. He added Bob Marley, almost everyone who did drugs, as it were, talking about Bob Marley, and came up with a very thoughtful response, which, as I say in my comment on the post, this will be a very good basis for a term paper if he chooses to turn it into one.
So the rest, I just want to just get your feedback from this, because, thank you. Because I think in this case, you see a teacher teaching online. I mean, is there any doubt, aside from the amount of work that it went to put this together, what we're thinking about is that sometimes we forget, we think this is a set it and forget it. And this is clearly something where it's not just curated, it's curated by the teacher, then it's curated by the students, and it's curated as a team. So we have every element of that sort of cooperative, and we try and get them elevated to that highest level of not just groupthink, but group thinking. Is there any comments that you